The science of Apriorian apologetics. Naturalism expresses the idea that nature is sufficient to explain itself. A naturalist claims only natural laws and forces operate in nature, therefore, all that nature is, can be explained in terms of natural laws and natural forces. But nature does not explain nature. No system contains metadata needed to operate the system, therefore, nature cannot explain itself. It follows that the very concept of natural science, or a field of study that explains itself, is an oxymoron. Natural science has to make assumptions that are not scientific in origin. Science incorporates a hidden metaphysics that is understood and assumed but never acknowledged. Apriorian apologetics agrees nature is composed of natural laws and its operations can be explained by the workings of natural law. That is no more significant than saying the workings of a home can be explained by home economics. But where did the home come from and why is this law operating in the home, rather than some other law? Only when we understand the nature of the home and the purpose of those residing in it, can we understand home economics and how a family operates. Science requires a meta-science or metaphysics. The law, as such, needs a higher source of explanation, and that is not found in the law itself. The law can explain why men stop at a red traffic signal. The law cannot explain why it is illegal to drive through a red light. The solar system can be explained by natural laws, but the natural laws cannot be explained by the solar system. The explanation of a system cannot be found within the system. There must be a meta-explanation. It is impossible for any system to contain within itself the explanation for why it exists in the form it exists. The system explains how what happens within the system, not why. For this there must be a metaphysics. Metaphysics only means that the explanation is in the form of metadata. The why of a system, the explanation for why this system and not some other, is found elsewhere, that is, outside of the system, in a metasystem. There is no law, without a means to regulate the law. We know there is a law of nature, but the laws of nature do not regulate themselves. The law of gravitation is an observation, not an explanation. We find this same sort of problem when talking about the mind. The mind cannot understand reality without the presence of categories in which to create associations. The mind, in the physical sense, is bombarded by signals from the senses. This would be like receiving digital inputs that have no ordering component, and no way to decipher them. A computer without an operating system is just a typewriter with no levers or paper. When we say we get signals from our senses, this is not entirely so. We are receiving communications, we get information, from our senses. But these signals are only informative because they contain order. Without metadata to organize the signals, we would only get static from our senses. If there was no order in the signal and no way to read the data that has been coded into the signal would not convey any meaning and could not be translated. Information needs meta-information to be coded and translated. The communication must have instructions and these instructions must be external to the message, not included in it, or the transmission cannot be coded or deciphered. If one does not understand how Morse code is organized into dots and dashes or lacks the information on how to decode the signal is just noise. Nature is a book that contains what one needs to know about nature. But to understand the plot and how the events unfold in the context of the book, we need to know how to read the book. But nature does not contain the meta-information, the information needed to read and understand nature. Those who do not understand the language will not be able to unravel the content of the book, so it is with natural science. We have the book of nature, but do we have the accompanying volume which explains its grammar? Random elements never ought to be introduced into an investigation or theory. The least number of factors ought to be used, necessary to make an explanation possible. Nature is a coherent whole. But natural law does not explain what gravity or magnetism is. Natural law tells us how things happen but not the why. Natural law dictates we be sexual creatures, but it does not tell us what sort of sexual creatures we are to be. However, natural science is imposed on nature as an explanatory device, but it is used as if mankind is the key to the understanding of nature. We are not. Romans 1:26-27 For this cause God gave them up unto vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature, and likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error which was meet. This is the problem with naturalists, for they see but cannot understand, they feel, but lack context. 1 Corinthians 2:14 But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual person sees nature in context. But then the question needs to be posed, if man is to discern nature from outside of nature, where is the platform on which he ought to stand? Galatians 2:16 Knowing that a man is not justified by the works of the law, but by the faith of Jesus Christ, even we have believed in Jesus Christ, that we might be justified by the faith of Christ, and not by the works of the law, for by the works of the law shall no flesh be justified. Christians read this and skim over it and think that there is nothing above us. We are not under the law, so we must be free. But there is more to life than the law. Rom 1:31 Without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful. Romans 2:12-15 For as many as have sinned without law shall also perish without law, and as many as have sinned in the law shall be judged by the law. For not the hearers of the law are just before God, but the doers of the law shall be justified. For when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these, having not the law, are a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts the meanwhile accusing or else excusing one another. To live in the Spirit is to be free of law. This does not mean we are free, because there is no such thing as being free of the law unless one is reborn in the Spirit. Romans 2:26-28 Therefore if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, shall not his uncircumcision be counted for circumcision? And shall not uncircumcision which is by nature, if it fulfill the law, judge thee, who by the letter and circumcision dost transgress the law? For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly, neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh. Romans 11:24 For if thou wert cut out of the olive tree which is wild by nature, and wert graft contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these, which be the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? 1 Cor 15:44-46 It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body, and there is a spiritual body. And so it is written, the first man Adam was made a living soul, the last Adam was made a quickening spirit. Howbeit that was not first which is spiritual, but that which is natural, and afterward that which is spiritual. If you are of the opinion that nature is sufficient, then everything that explains you is found in the natural world. Your love, charity, intelligence, feelings, views, values, concerns and more, are all the result of natural forces. Your children and your spouse in their entirety, were present implicitly, in the Big Bang. When reality exploded into existence, everything you are was present, just waiting to unfold according to implacable natural law. There is nothing special about you or anyone you know, because you were all ordained by the very event of nature coming into being. Galatians 4:8-9 Howbeit then, when ye knew not God, ye did service unto them which by nature are no gods. But now, after that ye have known God, or rather are known of God, how turn ye again to the weak and beggarly elements, whereunto ye desire again to be in bondage? God is not a superfluous element to nature. When people talk about the redundancy of the God hypothesis, they are not talking about science. But we do not understand creation nor the nature of evil. We study evil and call it good. Man was created a living soul but sinned and was cast out of Eden. Therefore, he became flesh, a being under the law. Man was not created originally under the law but put himself under it. Therefore, in studying man as a sinful creature, man studies man under the law. But there is a greater and a higher truth. This is Apologetics. F2-2-3 Wherein in time past ye walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience, among whom also we all had our conversation in times past in the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. Apologetics is not a science, or a field of study bounded by a set of physical factors. Apologetics is a meta-science. Apologetics looks at the narrative of science as a created thing. Truth has an origin. Truth is not truth unless it is a communication. We cannot understand what is being communicated unless we understand the language of the one talking to us. Nature does not talk to us. God speaks to us through nature. God is telling us there is good and evil. There is flesh and spirit. This is important. There are two groups but one division. We are two races divided into two realities. Science is not an idle or ad hoc search for verifiable data points. It is a technical methodology for translating man from one realm to another. Ignorance is not just about the volume of data we have access to, it is the type of data we utilize. Galatians 2:14-15 But when I saw that they walked not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, I said unto Peter before them all, If thou, being a Jew, livest after the manner of Gentiles, and not as do the Jews, why compellest thou the Gentiles to live as do the Jews? We who are Jews by nature, and not sinners of the Gentiles. The Jews live by the law. The Jews were a people chosen by God to illustrate to us, the Gentiles, what it was like to live by the law. But by the law we are not saved. This has not been understood. The science that is based on natural law cannot perfect us. It cannot translate man. For this we need faith. This faith does not bear fruit unless it is grounded in truth. This exercise of faith is a science because there is a methodology attached to living in faith. Salvation is an algorithm. God is a God of order, not of disorder. One might as well claim that subjective impressions are not sufficient to save us, because the church is not built by means of subjective impressions. We are talking about real measurable things here. Science is not science without quantification. Good can be quantified, if we understand Scripture. 2 Peter 1:4 Whereby are given unto us exceeding great and precious promises, that by these ye might be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through lust. God divided good from evil. This division is real, and if real it is objective. But conceptually, the only way to have an objective division is, oddly enough, by that which is totally conceptual, numbers. A business makes or loses money depending on whether its income or expenses is the larger number. There is an inverse relationship, in that profits cannot increase unless expenses decline relative to earnings. So, it is with good and evil. If we wish to be good, we have to produce more value than we consume. This is no different when it comes to science. We can do empirical research the conventional way and look for data points. However, to say that this is divorced from reality, is to be divorced from reality. What largely governs scientific research is the grant process. Science could be likened to a process of finding data that leads to greater financial rewards in the form of grants. We do think scientists ought to be paid, but we do not think science is divorced from reality, nor from the needs of civilization. Ivory tower science is not objective. If plumbers and librarians have to produce value for what they receive, so ought scientists. Scientists expend energy in the amount of work they do and the resources they consume. This needs to have a return on investment. This is not even controversial because without a return the research is irrelevant and over time funds must necessarily dry up. What is up for debate is who decides what the value of the research is. Is it to be a grant-giving lobbyist or the scientific sector? Ought the science community dish out grants, according to what they see as worthwhile, or ought a philanthropist? Who ought to control the financing? Apriorian apologists believe it is the science community that ought to oversee the disbursement of funds and reap the rewards or incur the losses. In the wider context, the worker is worthy of their wages and each person is responsible for the costs they create. In the context of the scientific sector, it is the sector that pays the wages and assigns the work. The science community reaps the rewards. In the context of the wider community, science along with the rest of humanity builds the church, which is a synonym for the community of man. We are required to add value to the world or to the assets given to us by God. We collectively and singularly add value to assets. This is what gives us our value. It might seem reasonable to argue we cannot tie the practice of science to economics, but of course it is impossible not to. All research has to be paid for. The question is who funds and directs and determines the research? It seems more reasonable to see science as part of the community of men, responsible for its own costs and for finding ways to be relevant to the world. Of course, this will to some degree change the trajectory of research to some degree. But why not? So, scientists have to be relevant. That is not the worst-case scenario. The individual scientist must prove himself relevant to his field and his field must demonstrate relevance to the entire sector. The scientific sector must prove they are doing something of value for the nation and planet. If an experiment provides a process that makes goods cheaper, or a theory reduces costs for a sector, it gives the entire planet a marginal benefit, howsoever small. If a theory or process is time-consuming and requires more inputs, it is further from the truth, than one which is more elegant. Science can be consolidated. The soft sciences can be hardened. All it takes is a means of validation tied to quantification. But there is only one thing of value and only one measure of value, this is labor. The labor theory of value is more than a theory of price, it is a measure of value. A theory that produces more value is a theory that produces more truth. James 3:6-8 And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity, so is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beasts, and of birds, and of serpents, and of things in the sea, is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind, but the tongue can no man tame, it is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Objectivity is not just about science, it is about morality. When we say man is an animal, we are expressing an assumption. There is no objectivity in this. If man is an animal, then we have no right to restrain or contain him. How can we say anything is wrong if man operates by instinct and feral desire? If man is required to build the church, then the church, as society, can be measured economically. Acts can be determined to pay their own way and add value to the assets of the earth generally, and to the scientific community, more specifically. If science cannot operate as a business, what good is it? How much truth and value does a science that has no objectivity have? What is more objective than an index that determines if an action adds or subtracts value from a field of activity?